chapter 10, we're going to go beyond the major and minor scales, and we're going to talk about some special scales. These scales are unique in the sense that they have something other than 7 tones. Think about the C major scale. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tones, and then 8 is the same as 1. So C at the bottom, C at the top. All these scales we're going to talk about in chapter 10 have something other than 7 tones. For instance, the first one, the chromatic scale. Basically, what a chromatic scale is a series of half steps. Now you remember in the major scale, there's this pattern of whole step, then a half step, whole step, whole step. Well, the chromatic scale is all half steps, like this, starting on C. Now, the thing about the chromatic scale, because it's all half steps, there really isn't any pattern that you have to worry about. So regardless of where you start, the chromatic scale is going to be the same. Now, especially in pop and rock music, you're not going to hear this scale in its entirety. Typically what you would hear is little pieces of the scale. Like, you know, for instance, a guitar player might use a chromatic scale to run up to the first note of a solo, you know, or lots of times in flutes and piccolos you'll hear like when they fall off a note, they might fall off like a chromatic scale to fall off of a note, or like a string section, for instance, if they're doing a rush up to the downbeat of a chorus, they might use a chromatic scale there. But you don't often hear a complete chromatic scale. Now, sort of the antithesis of the chromatic scale is called the whole tone scale. So a chromatic scale is all half steps. The whole tone scale, just like it sounds, is all whole steps. So it would, starting on C would sound like this. Now, this scale is sort of cliche in the sense that, you know, just when you hear that sound, you know it's either like creation of the world, or it's like a dream sequence when someone's, you know. I mean, it's funny how our ears tend to kind of clue into things based on the way they've been used in movies and TV shows, but that's sort of what a whole tone scale says to our brains. Now, if you want to analyze why that is, it's kind of interesting because it's all whole tones. So it doesn't have, you know, the major scale has that pattern of whole steps and half steps that tells you where home is. Well, the thing about a whole tone scale, it's hard to really know where home is because it's all whole steps. You don't really know where you are. So in a sense, you can see how, like for a dream sequence or when you're floating in space, a whole tone scale is kind of a perfect accompaniment for that. Now, the interesting thing about, you can see where like a C whole tone scale is the same notes as a D whole tone scale, same as an E whole tone scale, same as an F sharp whole tone scale. So in effect, there's really only 2 different whole tone scales, right? The one that starts on C that has these notes, which is the same as the D, the E, the F sharp, the G sharp, the B flat. Now, if you just move that down a half step, the B whole tone scale, that's the one that's shared with C sharp, D sharp, F, G, A, as you can see. So you've either got this one or this one. And they share the same notes. Now, we're going to talk about another scale that has other than 7 notes. This is an interesting one. This is called the pentatonic scale. And as you can tell by the name, the pentatonic scale has 5 notes. Now, an easy way to think about the pentatonic scale, let's go back to starting on middle C, is it's just like major, but it leaves out what I call the hot notes. It leaves out the half steps. In other words, here's your major scale, whole, whole, there's that half step. Well, we're going to leave the F out. Now there's the other half step between B and C, so we're going to leave out the B. So it's a C major scale with no F and no B, and that leaves you with, that's a pentatonic scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 notes, pentatonic, 5 tones. Now the reason the pentatonic scale is great, again, as you can tell, our tendency, our ears automatically sort of hear that sound, and we think of, you know, maybe you think of like Asian music, or you think of the sound of like a koto is tuned to that pentatonic scale. But there's an awful lot of folk music in Western music that's tuned to that as well. Think of this song, Open the Eyes of My Heart by Paul Balash. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord, I want to see you high and lifted up. That whole song is a pentatonic scale. Think of Amazing Grace, pentatonic scale. Yeah, another one, how about Auld Lang Syne? The reason why these kind of folk songs are sort of universal, the pentatonic scale shows up so much, is because it, again, thinking technically, without the half steps, it doesn't have the inherent dissonance. The half step, those clashes, really don't exist in the pentatonic scale. So you do hear it in a lot of folk music, not just Asian, but all cultures throughout the world. One exercise that I like to do when I'm teaching improvisation, and you could even do this with young kids, if you look at the black keys for a second, and, you know, it seems like we always focus on C major and the white keys, but if you look at the black keys, what you realize is that is a pentatonic scale. You could call it an F sharp pentatonic or a G flat. It's the same exact thing. F sharp and G flat are enharmonic, two different names for the same note. But a great exercise is if you take a chord progression, say in F sharp, take a real simple progression like with our primary triads. And you tell a young student, just take the black keys and just improvise your heart out. The thing is, you can't play a wrong note, because those notes fit into every single chord. So it's a good exercise to teach improvisation, because basically you can't make a mistake, right? You'll find the pentatonic scale literally everywhere. It's one of those scales that if you're improvising a solo, it tends to fit over everything because it doesn't have the hot notes of the major scale, so you don't have to worry about those notes crashing against a chord. It's just a great sort of universal sounding scale to use. That's the pentatonic scale.